Welcome to the Associated Black Charities Equity at Work webinar series. We are so excited to be hosting this evening's special edition, teen edition series of Equity at Work. And we're doing so this evening in partnership with the CollegeBound Foundation. So many of you know that monthly Associated Black Charities hosts a webinar that's meant to assist in guiding and providing resources for Black people, Black families, Black communities, and specifically Black professionals in navigating structural racism and all the ways it shows up, specifically in healthcare, equity and access, in housing and education, in the criminal justice system, and in workplace discrimination. And so earlier this year, we had the pleasure of hosting an Equity at Work webinar that talked about the cost of code switching. In doing so, we did so with an adult lens and talked about how code switching shows up in the workplace. In our new partnership with CollegeBound Foundation, we found that it would be super important and useful to talk about how code switching shows up in the lives of our own Black teens and our own Black young adults. We know that things that affect Black adults also affect Black children. And so we thought it would be very useful today to delve into a conversation on those things. And so tonight, we're going to actually talk about code switching for teens. So understanding that code switching is a crucial life skill for Black teenagers as they navigate various social and academic spaces on their journey through primary school, middle school, and high school, and ultimately through college. Code switching refers to the practice of a person changing the way that they present themselves based on their surroundings in order to become more acceptable, tending to the majority. It's often a way to adapt to different social contexts and to show up in a way that's more aligned with the expectations of a group. So today we have very special guests that will be able to share their lived experience with code switching as young adults, as teens. We also have a professional that I'm so excited to introduce you to shortly. But before we get started, I'd like to share a video to give our conversation some frame of reference.
It's defined as the ability to switch between languages in a single conversation. It's called code switching, and we all do it to some degree. For instance, you may speak more casually at home than you do at work, but for Black people, code switching is far more complex. Some would argue the ability to do it well is a prerequisite for a certain level of success.
To make some money here, use your white boys.
Code switching is something many Black people are all too familiar with.
Hey, Mr. Kramer, this is Langston from Regalview.
As soon as we hear someone speak, our minds automatically make associations about where they're from geographically. We also make assumptions about their education level, their income level.
Miles Durkee has done extensive research on racial code switching as an assistant professor at the University of Michigan.
Code switching, I describe it as a double-edged sword, where there's benefits and advantages, but there are also serious costs and consequences.
For example, when a Black person doesn't or can't effectively code switch, the result can be damaging. Case in point, the star witness in the 2013 George Zimmerman trial.
I had told you.
Rachel Jean Tell was on the phone with Trayvon Martin moments before he was killed.
I had asked him how the man looked like. He looked like a creepy cracker.
When she spoke in court, it was clear the 19-year-old's testimony was largely being judged on her mannerisms and style of speaking. Ultimately, George Zimmerman walked free.
They have even said, that it's a survival technique,
Yes.
And maybe it's saved their lives in some situations.
Interacting with the police is a clear example where code switching can be the difference between life or death. If an officer already perceives a Black male as threatening, code switching is an extremely effective way to help alleviate some of that anxiety.
But code switching is not just in the way a person speaks. It can also involve your entire behavioral profile, from hairstyles to clothing and the way in which you carry yourself. Former President Barack Obama's effective ability to code switch has been well documented.
And you go through a whole game?
When he was meeting the Dream Team, and you can see his handshake differs simply based on the race of who he's, greeting. So you see with white individuals in the coaching staff, it's a very standard, American handshake. But when it's Black players on the team, he's more like dapping it up with the players.
For many Black people, though, constantly focusing on changing themselves in order to make white people feel comfortable can be exhausting and unhealthy.
Those who tend to code switch more frequently also report significantly more workplace fatigue and burnout from their current positions, simply because they have to be a different person and mask all the cultural assets that they probably value and appreciate internally, but they realize that those same traits aren't valued in their workplace.
And while it can be exhausting, Omari Keels wouldn't go so far as to call it inauthentic because he says it's such a huge part of the Black American experience.
I don't see it as a burden anymore. I just see it as something that is a part of who I am, a part of how I navigate this world.
You're aware that this is...
Shawnice Battle says she didn't always know what it was called, but first noticed code switching at a very young age.
I just know when my mom spoke to certain people, she did it. And when my friends in school spoke to certain people, they did it. I just thought it was a part of being an adult, not like this thing that was specific to my race.
Do you feel that it is an authentic part of you, or that you're not being authentic when you use that voice?
So I think that is definitely a question that I've grappled with and thought about for a really long time. Because especially when I initially found out what it was, I'm like, oh my God, this is not me. I'm just switching because I'm in this environment and I'm using this completely different voice. And this is not who I am at all.
Also, for the person whose code switching is always activated, it still sometimes isn't enough to overcome racism. So what can we do, especially in the workplace, to make sure marginalized groups can be their authentic self?
We also need representation all the way up hierarchical ladder of leadership in the organization as well, where individuals from underrepresented backgrounds can start to have a voice to start to dictate what that corporate culture looks like.
Okay, so we learned a little bit about code switching. So in our context for discussion tonight, we're talking about racial code switching, which is a specific form of code switching that refers to the practice of altering one's language, tone, behavior, or cultural expressions to navigate different racial contexts. And this says it can be a coping mechanism for individuals who face racial prejudice or disinclusion or discrimination in places like schools, obviously the workplace, and other social situations. It can be a strategy for gaining social acceptance or cultural capital in different ethnic communities. You'll hear terms like acting Black or acting white. And it can have psychological effects on individuals, including, we know, feelings of exhaustion, feelings of anxiety, inauthenticity, as well as good effects, such as possibly increased social mobility or adaptability. But at this point, knowing that the root causes of Black people feeling the need to code switch really comes from historical occurrences and systemic racism, we'd like to delve a little bit deeper into the conversation. And so now I'd like to welcome onto our call Dr. Kendall Wiley-Pugh. Dr. Kendall, please join us on camera. She is a licensed clinical psychologist practicing in the DC metropolitan area, and she's currently in private practice. She has a particular interest in working with children and adolescents whom research has indicated as being at an increased risk for the development of mental disorders. Her areas of specialty are conducting various psychological assessments, facilitating individual, group, and family therapy, providing supervision, crisis management, teacher, psychiatric, and parental consultation. Dr. Wiley-Pugh has worked with school-age children diagnosed with disorders such as anxiety, depression, bereavement, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, ADHD, and more. She's also worked with adults diagnosed with severe mental health disorders in various forensic and psychiatric settings. So at this time, Dr. Pugh, we're going to ask you to join us on camera and to join the conversation if you're able to. Perfect. There you are. Welcome. Welcome to the call.
Oh, welcome everyone else.
So in just a little bit, we're actually going to talk to some teens and young adults who are willing to talk about their lived experience with code switching. But we'd love to hear from you just some insights about how code switching affects young Black teens, young Black children and teens who are navigating school, perhaps preparing for college and the workforce.
Yes. Okay. So when you think about code switching as a person of color, research would suggest that you have 38% of Black people and 45% of Hispanics report feeling unfairly judged for the language they use to express themselves. People of color often feel an intense social pressure to code switch, especially when they are in predominantly white environments. Because of the treatment, the negative treatment, there is an immense amount of pressure on people of color to adopt a more acceptable mode of speech in formal spaces. What's interesting to me, because I want to share this real quick, they spoke about Barack Obama, but Michelle Obama talked about how she had to do quite a few changes as well while in the White House. When we think of code switching, we think primarily of language, but we also have to take into consideration the behavior. One of the things that she said was so empowering for her after she left the White House was to wear her braids. She thought that wearing braids while in the White House would generate a significant amount of conversation. And she said, while she could have done it and she felt powerful enough to do it, she really just didn't want the questions, and she didn't want Barack to have to deal with her issue of wearing braids, which is so culturally acceptable for us, but not so much so for the predominant population. So code switching as it relates to behavior. Some of the things that we might do, we might change the way that we dress. We might change the way that we wear our hair, as I previously indicated. We may change the way we walk. One of the criticisms of Barack when he was in the White House is that he walked too Black. And so if that's
a little bop, right?
He had that little bop. And so, he would subtly receive criticism. No one would openly come out and talk about it. Of course, the other political party would, but yeah, he was often criticized about that. So what happens with the need to code switch? Most teenagers, particularly the ones I've seen, they start to experience burnout symptoms. And burnout symptoms from code switching might feel like you have to detach yourself from your environment or reality, emotional exhaustion, feeling dissatisfied with your friends and your school, experiencing irritability or extreme types of stress, low performance at work or at school, and just not feeling accomplished. And what I want to really focus on more so is the emotional exhaustion. Mm-hmm. Okay, and some of those symptoms. All right. The biggest symptom of emotional exhaustion is anxiety. Okay, so that irritability that just won't dissipate, won't go away. Typically you have a hard time mitigating the symptoms of anxiety. And we found that with chronic stress, it's likely to increase anxiety-like behaviors. Now, here's where it becomes somewhat debilitating. Anxiety and depression, they affect cognition. And if thinking is affected by anxiety and depression, you can't perform optimally within the academic arena. So you do have to kind of be aware of when the burnout symptom of anxiety is starting to get to a point where it's impairing your ability to function within the academic arena. Fatigue is another example of burnout. Not only can burnout leave you feeling emotionally drained, but it can also cause physical symptoms such as exhaustion. Ironically, when you have high emotional exhaustion, you might struggle to fall or stay asleep at night, leaving you even more drained during your days, okay? Emotional exhaustion is often a sign that a person isn't able to have a healthy balance between school and life. This imbalance leads to feelings of anxiety, resentment, stress, or having a lack of motivation to try to perform at a normal level. And it's so important to recognize the signs and symptoms of emotional exhaustion. And this is what some refer to as burnout. Lack of motivation. The stresses associated with high emotional exhaustion can leave you feeling pessimistic or even trapped, especially when you have to navigate two worlds. When you've got to navigate that world of being with your Black friends and your white friends, again, it can be very, very stressful. It's interesting, and I have to use my daughter as an example. She was having an event, and she was inviting her girlfriends from school, and she was inviting some other friends. And I said, are you, how are you going to do this? And she said, I have a plan. She says, because I don't want to get burned out. She says, I know how my cousins feel about my friends who I go to school with. And I know how my friends who I go to school with feel about my cousins. And I have to navigate both worlds and bring them together. And she does it beautifully. She really does. Sometimes they say you can't mix friends, but she does a really good job of it. Real quick, the first time I became aware of code switching, I was actually in the car with Kimberly, and she may have been like 7 or 8. And she said, I was on the phone talking to a colleague, and she said, why do you do that? And I said, do what, sweetheart? She said, you're different when you're on the phone. And I said, what? What are you talking about? She says, no, mommy, you're like completely different when you talk to your work-related friends. And so at that point, I didn't, I don't know if they were calling it code switching at the time, but I explained to her what it was and what I was doing and why it was necessary. And she didn't quite get it, but now she does. She gets
Absolutely.
it. And believe it or not, she's at an HBCU and she still has to code switch. So, it's,
I was going to say, Dr. Raleigh Pugh, that this is absolutely likely learned behavior as our teens and young people are watching us navigate code switching. But also, let's talk a little bit, because I've heard you speak before. And one like really memorable thing that I remember you talking about is how, as Black parents, we place our Black children into white spaces, sometimes because we feel like those are better. That it's a better education, it's a better atmosphere, it's better opportunity. But I've heard you talk about the psychological toll that comes along with doing that when our children tend to be not well represented in those environments and really having to struggle. Can you talk a little bit about that and how code switching fits into that?
Yes. And what I will say is, when we place our kids in predominantly white schools, we are, the intention is to make sure that our children are provided with the best education that they sometimes don't get in other schools, not because the administration is Black or not because there are Black students there. It's just because the schools are not as well resourced. Okay, you're not going to get the top of the line when it comes to the computer lab. You're not going to get the top of the line when it comes to the library resources, or even the dining hall, or even the athletic equipment. They're not as well resourced. So it has nothing to do with the color of the people running the school. It has more to do with the monetary
allocation
allowances that these schools receive. But the other thing that I found in my research is that students in predominantly white schools are often exposed more so to overt displays of racism than in other schools. Okay. When you're in a predominantly Black school and someone, uses the N-word, it's not in my book, but it may be perceived as that's just a cultural thing. Okay. However, when you're in a white school and someone refers to you as the N-word, it's painful, but it is more likely to happen in a predominantly white school. So those overt, and parents are always amazed to hear this, that one teacher that you just don't feel so comfortable around, the way she looks at you, the way she interacts with you. And you have to internalize that as her being uncomfortable with your race, your ethnicity. And so that is very difficult to navigate as a student, and it's very painful. And it does generate feelings of anxiety and depression. And I will tell you, I have made a couple trips to my daughter's school when she has suggested to me that she just didn't feel right. Nothing was overtly said, but she just didn't like the experience she was having with a teacher. And, upon investigation, we found that what she was experiencing was absolutely accurate. Mm-hmm. So again, being in predominantly white institutions is very stressful. We'd like to think that, oh, you're there, you're well taken care of, you have resources. Where do you think racists send their children? To the same schools, the private schools that we send our children. And so we as parents have to be mindful when our children come home and say, something's not right. I don't like the way she looks at me. These aren't indications of paranoia. These are indications of something's not right. And so, right. And so again, we have to have that open line of communication with our children. And when they tell us that they're experiencing something, we need to investigate.
So I have two different lanes that I'd like to explore with you. The first is the benefits of Black teens, Black young adults who code switch effectively. A little bit of research says that it actually, in certain settings, can lead to increased academic success because it facilitates better communication with teachers. It also says that having adaptable communication skills is something that's valuable. We know as adults that can be valuable in the workplace.
Absolutely.
And so what do you think about those benefits of it for Black teens and young adults knowing how to effectively code switch?
Well, we know that there are definitely benefits because we encourage our children to code switch. So we understand that there is a certain value associated with the language that we use. Again, daughter was in class and she was talking to her professor. And again, she's at an HBCU, and the professor says, "You speak very well," but most of the kids in her class speak well. And so she was attempting to explain a book that she had read that happens to be one of my favorite books. And so I don't know if I would necessarily call it code switching because she was in a classroom with a group of African-American students who spoke, in a similar manner. But still, he praised her for the way that she speaks. And it does increase the value that we associate with our children. When parents take their teenagers or their young kids or their young adults certain places and they speak a certain way, unfortunately, it's perceived as an anomaly. And so you garnish the attention of others. You garnish the attention of your teacher in the classroom because, again, while it should not be perceived as an anomaly when a child speaks well, unfortunately, it is. And so that is one of the benefits of being able to code switch. When you leave school and you're walking home with your girlfriends and your buddies, and you speak differently, and you're infusing music and language and just the hip hop culture, you speak differently, and that is okay. It's okay. But also, when you are in a professional environment, whether that's school or work, you must learn how to speak the language. Okay, it's important, and there are inherent benefits to that. And so we can't negate that because it is important. I don't know how many of you in the audience have been with your friends and they've made jokes about, oh my gosh, you speak white. No, I don't speak white. I'm speaking correct English, which is what I was taught. Okay, it's not a white thing. It's not a Black thing. It's just correct English. Okay, it's standard English. All right, so we have to kind of get out of the mindset of chastising our children and our children chastising each other. Oh, you speak white. No, I just speak standard English. I speak the language, okay? So those are some of the benefits. And again, when you go certain places, when you apply for certain jobs, because sometimes they don't always associate a level of value with our children. When you open your mouth, that is how you garnish your value. That is how you garnish your respect. That is how you give people the impression that you have been raised in an environment where your parents think education is very important and that it will always be an asset to you. It will always take you places. It will always open doors. It will typically open doors for you. So please don't ever minimize, the ability to code switch, because it is extremely important. Very, very important.
Let me ask you this last question. One of the things I want to bring forward is I actually have a 16-year-old son who does not code switch. And when I say that he does not code switch, he shows up with who he is authentically, right? And so there seems to be this new generational decision that perhaps code switching is not showing up unapologetically. And so some of the research has shown that younger generations of Black people may be more likely to reject the idea as a form of assimilation, instead seeking to express their authentic selves in school and in social environments. Now, my son in particular, his how he shows up is not typically culturally, ethnically Black, right? And there are sometimes, because I code switch so well, that I go down to like, let me just be real, right? Like my real sister girl talk, and he doesn't relate to that. In his not code switching, he shows up very proper. He shows up not, very, I would say in some ways whitewashed because of the environments I've had him in. But alternately, there are teens who have family and belong to churches and community organizations who show up authentically Black. What do you think about this nuanced, like new generation decision of like kind of not playing the game that our generation has chosen to play and deciding that they're going to show up the way they are unapologetically?
If it works, it works. Okay. And I totally understand. I think for like Kimberly just started the code switching a little. And I think that's because she started driving and going to different places and different environments. But prior to that, minimal code switching, didn't feel inclined to do it, didn't really even know how to do it. Okay. And so she showed up authentically. I still think she shows up authentically. I think she feels like she has a little flair now, that she can kind of like navigate in and out of environments without bringing too much attention to herself. But there's only but so much code switching she's capable of doing.
Right.
Because it's not her. It's not authentically her. You'll never see her, going into sister girl mode because she doesn't even know how to do it. That's not her thing. And she's not very comfortable doing it. I think who you are authentically, if you are healthy in that lane, if you are healthy in that body, that's where you stay, that's where you remain, and you do it unapologetically, okay? Because you don't have to apologize for who you are as an individual. You don't have to apologize for who you are as a young woman or a young man. If being more culturally inclined, if that's your way of representing yourself and you're comfortable with that and it works, show up accordingly. Okay? But always represent yourself with a certain level of respect. And I think that seals the deal for you. Okay?
Perfect. Well, we'd like to take the opportunity to just thank you for being on with us, and thank you for sharing your expertise of working with young children and adolescents and young adults. We appreciate you, Dr. Wiley Pugh. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. You're welcome. You guys have a great night.
Thank you. So what I would like to do as we transition into welcoming our teens to the College Show, just one more video that I think will undergird the tenets of what code switching is and how it shows up for young people.
Holy Scott Foley, I can't believe we're being so whiskey cavalier about sneaking away from a field trip.
I'm gonna need you to calm down.
Hey, my bad, big dog.
Ain't nothing, bro. You didn't even scuff the forces.
I'd have gave myself the fade right quick.
You're stupid, bro. On God, though. I'm trying to get like you.
Nah, I'm trying to get like you. Yo, stay up, fam.
Stay up, bro.
Devon, I've never heard you talk like that before.
How do you talk to Black people?
The same way I talk to white people.
What? Are you serious? You don't have one of these?
What?
You don't have a code switch?
No. How does a code switch work?
Well, it's a little tricky, but let me break it down for you. As a Black kid, you gotta learn this handy trick of social self-defense. You switch up your speak and give your manner a tweak depending on the audience. I'll be Will Smith witty, or cool like Diddy, or affable as you please. Cause when you're young and black, you develop a knack for putting the world at ease. It's called code switching, and I'm a master of the dial. I got a different me for every situation. No matter black, white, old or young, I can tune into your tongue, and nobody can tell which one's the real me, yeah. For those timid white suburban moms, I'm humble, saccharine sweet. Just a skinny Keenan Thompson, ma'am, no need to cross the street.
For older black South Dialect played a respectful grandson role. They don't care for rap or hip-hoppity crap, so I'm warm as Motown soul.
And I can charm the old school Italian cats with a smile like Sammy Davis. But I always know that as soon as I go, they go straight back to Stone Cold racist. Code switching, got the whole world on my dial, and it's anybody's guess which one is me.
That was incredible!
Okay, so we are excited now to actually bring on some people with some current lived experience. I'm going to invite our panelists on to join me on camera, our teen and young adult participants. Please join us at this time. Hello. Hi, how are you? Okay, we're going to allow you all to have an opportunity to introduce yourselves. We'll start with Ms. Jones and then go to Mr. Coriat and then Ms. Blake. Love for you to make sure you're off mute and introduce yourselves to the viewing audience tonight.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so glad when Mother Christy reached out and said that she wanted me to come. So I am the young adult on the call. I'm 23. I graduated from Towson Towson University in 2022, and I went to Bryn Mawr School for Girls for 13 years before that. I worked in DC for a bit in advertising, and now I'm back in Maryland as an admissions counselor at a private school. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Quinlan Coriat, the other young adult here, and 17 years old. I go to St. Paul's right now, but heading to Hampton next year, senior in high school.
Okay, wonderful.
Hi, I'm Sanaa. I'm 15. I am a sophomore at Wild Lake High School in Columbia, Howard County, and I'm really excited to be a part of the panelists and answer a few questions for you guys.
Wonderful. So we're going to dive right into it if you all are ready for that. I want to know what code switching means to you. When you hear the word, we watched a little video, I was kind of jamming to the song and everything else. What does code switching mean to you and how has it shown up in your life? We'll start with Quinlan.
Yeah, code switching to me really means adapting. For some people, it's just based off of what environment they've lived in. But for me, as somebody who's really moved around a lot, I think code switching, it doesn't even feel like switching almost. It kind of just feels like something that just happens naturally sort of to the environment that you're in.
Okay. Jordan?
For me, I think that it's the realization that basically you can't bring your way of doing things into another situation and have that lead to inclusion and have that lead to being perceived in a way that is beneficial to you. I think that, now that I'm out of Bryn Mawr and I went to Towson, which is way more diverse in the workforce, I now realize that I am me wherever I go. And it's okay that I'm this blend of everything, you know what I mean? But I think that at a young age, when you're trying to navigate it and you realize people for the first time in your life, you realize that people at home don't talk the way that people at school talk, or people at rehearsal or piano lessons or cheerleading or wherever you may go. It's that realization and realizing, wow, like I may have to actually change a bit in order to fit in here.
Okay. And Sanaa? gonna make sure you unmute.
Code switching to me just means that adapting to like the environment that I'm in. So like just like acting how like the people around me mostly, and just like feeling like, I don't know, like just like how everyone around me just like being the same and stuff like that.
So basically how you all described it is really kind of conforming and contorting yourself to whatever environment you're in. Have you ever felt in an environment that you couldn't be authentically who you are, that you couldn't maybe talk about certain things that you experience in your home life or your family life, that wouldn't be acceptable, and maybe give some examples of that? And we'll hear from anyone who has something to contribute.
I think for me, I can go first. I think I remembered like distinctly at Bryn Mawr, I don't remember a lot from my like being 5, 6, 7, I don't remember, but I remember distinctly saying certain things that my parents said at my house, like at Bryn Mawr, and people looking at me like crazy, like, what is she talking about? And it led to isolation. And I think that is when I realized, like, wow, okay, I can't be who I fully am right now. I have to adapt to what these people are,
And what do you think, just while we're talking, what do you think are the consequences of being who you are? Like kind of interjecting things that are unfamiliar to an environment. Have you experienced any of those consequences, or have you shied away from kind of even putting yourself in that situation?
I think that now I am someone that I'm the same here as I am at dinner with my family, as I am with my boyfriend. I'm the same person everywhere. But I think that the consequences when you are young and you yourself don't really know who you are is you feel, I guess, isolated. I also felt at Bryn Mawr sometimes that things were automatically my fault because I was the person that was different. So it must be Jordan that's wrong because everybody else acts this way. And I know as a teacher, I didn't see what actually happened, but Jordan talks different and Jordan walks differently and Jordan laughs at different things. So it must be Jordan's fault. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm, and so I think that those are the consequences at a young age. But I think that as you get older, you realize, no, I need to bring my special sauce to this. Because if I don't, I need to pave the way for the next Black girl who's going to come.
Love that.
Do you know what I mean? And so as you get older, you take the good with the bad and you're like, okay, in this situation, I'm going to be, there was a rule at Bryn Mawr that you couldn't wear beads in your hair. There was literally a rule that you cannot wear beads in your hair. And my mom and I did. We came home and I put pink and white beads in my hair and I went to school because I'm interjecting myself in this environment and this is who I am. And although people are going to touch my hair and say it's loud and say it's making noise, the next girl who comes up in 2006, 2007, they're going to be able to wear beads in their hair. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that it's a push and a pull and it's a realizing when it's okay to be yourself and kind of like taking that bullet, for somebody else.
I love that. So Quinlan or Sanaa, how has this showed up in your friend circles? And do you have different friend circles? Do you have friend circles that are more, conforming to kind of your family and Black community, and then those of people who are different than those circles? And how have you navigated that?
Staying like different because I play volleyball and my friends at school are mainly a majority Black and my friends at volleyball are majority white. So I'm always like myself, but I do like have I wouldn't say different lives, but like I do like make sure like I know like the difference of like how I'm acting like with those both, but I'm still like myself and I still like bring who I am so those two sides like still know like who I am like as a person.
Now, have you ever had the opportunity to bring those different groups together, and what does that look like?
Yeah, but it's not like mainly like mostly like at like birthdays or like events and stuff. Yes, but it's not like a long-term like
permanent
yeah
situation. Okay, Quinlan?
Yeah, so I definitely have a lot of different friend groups because I have various interests. Being I do music, I play sports, and and then plus also having like a larger like Black friend group too. That I've kind of like a mixture of different friend groups through like each of my different interests. And some of them can like mix with some of the different friend groups, but then I also see like a little bit of a divide between some people that I'm friends with. So it's I really haven't had the opportunity to like kind of like push them all into like the same room together, but still I see that I do kind of act a little bit differently around each friend group than I like would if I was with the other.
Okay, that's interesting. And what does that look like? Do you like, is it conscious or is this just something you automatically fall into?
I think it's more something that I automatically fall into because simply being what I'm around.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean it's kind of hard to put like a finger on it really. It just subconsciously just comes there, and it's like musically and stuff like that. When I'm talking about a lot of music related things, obviously the vocabulary will be different than if I'm talking around a friend group that doesn't know as much about music.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So
yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, even just like the terms and stuff I use, some people won't get what I'm saying if
Mm-hmm.
I like use different words or phrases.
Mm-hmm. So I will tell you all that even though I'm much, 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 much older than all of you, I actually grew up in white spaces. So I went to predominantly white schools. And then I was like craving Black culture. Of course, I had my church community and other organizations where I saw my Black people and all of that. But I craved Black culture to the point that I actually went from white environments and came to Morgan State University. So I made the decision to go to an HBCU specifically because I felt like something was missing in my experience. So I know Quinlan, you're on your way to Hampton. I know Jordan, you didn't go to an HBCU, but certainly a much more diverse environment. And then Sanaa, you know, I'm not sure what your plans are, but is that their moment where you start to crave just kind of like your own culture and more ethnicity and more inclusion? And how does that color your decisions about college? And even in college, what kind of things you participate in?
I feel like um majority of like my high school is Black, like I said before, but I do still like want to crave like that HBCU in college and go to a HBCU. Like I have actually been looking into colleges, even though I'm 15 and a sophomore, but mainly like universities, but HBCUs definitely because I just like want to know more about my culture and like be around people like that look like me.
Okay. Anyone else?
I can speak on this. I think, starting at Bryn Mawr so young, there were only 7 other Black girls in my class. And I feel like we all felt the need to have our own identity because we're all 5, 6, 7, 8 trying to navigate this white space. And I think we didn't come together. We did not form. Like it was not at Bryn Mawr, there was not a why are all the Black kids sitting at the same table.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we all hung out with everybody. Do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't really a thought that came in our head. But by the time high school came, we all realized the value of being with each other. Do you know what I mean? And we did hang out at lunch. And I still, like, to this day, my 2 best friends out of Bryn Mawr are white girls, like I must say. So we were still able to be friends with everybody else, but um, they were not like instead of each other. Do you know what I mean? I can hang out with my fellow Black women and we can talk about navigating the space, but I can also be friends with everybody else. It's not a one or the other type of thing. Mm-hmm. And I find that even when I went to college, a similar thing happened. I joined Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I wanted to be around other Black women who, like-minded individuals and pushing towards a mission. But I also was a part of an a cappella group where I was like one of the only Black girls in it. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that just realizing this duality within ourselves and realizing that we don't have to choose one or the other, is important.
Okay. Quinlan?
Yeah, definitely. I think diversity was one of the first things I was looking at when I was looking at different schools. Even if I didn't decide on an HBCU, I knew that I would still want to go to a school that was diverse because I've moved around a lot, as I said before. And actually, I lived in Florida prior to living in Maryland, and the school I went to, was only a little less than 5% white. Then going to a school that was about 95% white was a huge switch. And I saw I wasn't able to connect with people the same as I mean there are a couple of other like black students and stuff like that that were able to connect more with white students just because they're like, oh, this is sort of what I've been raised around. But then for me, who's just kind of used to being around like people closer to my skin color, then it was a little bit different, and I just saw that I tended to learn better and work better even with teachers that had the same skin tone as me. Even going to school now that's like still predominantly white, the black teachers and stuff have been the ones that I've connected with the best at
Wow.
the school.
Okay, that's interesting. And so I have a really major question for all of you. In your young lives, have you or can you like really truthfully say, have you experienced racism? And if so, what does that look like? In school or just in your journey, in the journey of what teens and young adults do, how has racism showed up in your life, if at all?
Yeah, so I've gotten a couple like small microaggressions and stuff here and there, but the I'd say that in Florida that it was a lot more clear than
Okay.
moving up to the north, because the north I felt like it was more microaggressions and like very like just clear racist
Okay.
acts. But yeah, I like while I was out on the field and stuff playing a game, got called the N-word during the game.
Mm.
And yeah, and so that like turned into a whole situation on its own. And it's like even at that school I said was 95% white, had got called some names and stuff like that that I definitely did like at all. Heard the N-word a couple of times that they're clearly not for my skin color. So just different things like that, hearing that definitely wasn't what I was used to, and obviously not right.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else want to share their experience with racism?
I do want to share one experience. This happened like during like volleyball. Most of the everyone is majority white. And it was my coach who like he would and at on the team there's only three black girls out of 13. So he would just act like very different. I mean, different towards like us, and the other girls have favorites and like just a whole bunch of like different stuff that at first I didn't know what it meant. Then I would tell my parents, and it would have to come to a point where we had to have like private meetings with him and stuff like that. And also hearing, like Quinlan said, like hearing the N word from different people that don't have my skin color towards me as well, and just experience that at a young age, just like yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not shocked to hear you all share these things that have happened to you, but it's really heartbreaking to know that things that have happened to me so many years ago in a whole nother generation continue to happen to you all, that happened to my predecessors. It's really heartbreaking that a lot of that harm has not been moved out. Anything, Jordan? Racism?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you're in a white space and it's hard to make friends and you are black and you realize that their whole friend group is not, there's not one black girl. And I think that that is a form of racism. Do you know what I mean? Because you have to wonder in white spaces, are people being me, don't like, do people not like me and not accept me because of who I am or because of my skin color? Do you know what I mean? And that's something that we have to face as black folks in white spaces every day. But I think that's, and, offhanded people that aren't black saying the N word and things like that as well. But yeah.
All three of you talking about the N word, and then people must call me the N word today behind my back, right? Like, because maybe I got a posture that people know that ain't gonna work out today. But I certainly I feel like I'm so hurt to hear that this is just blatantly something that's being, being launched and this type of abuse is catapulted towards you all, because I feel like being a teen or a young adult now comes with enough challenges on its own, and then for you all to have to navigate these other things additionally is really is not what we want to hear. And so let me just ask, it sounds like all of you have heard that there's been parental intervention in these spaces. Have you ever just kind of wished you didn't have to code switch? Have you ever felt like it was too much, like it required too much of you, that, you know, being different in spaces just was an extra thing you wish you didn't have to deal with?
Sorry. I feel like, yeah, I do feel like I wish I didn't have to code switch sometimes, because I feel like sometimes I feel like everyone should like be okay how everyone dresses, looks, and acts. And I feel like everyone should just be like, not, I don't want to say the same, but like okay with like differences. So yeah.
Anyone else?
I agree with you. I think that with me, code switching isn't necessarily like anymore how I speak or how I carry myself, but I find that it's things like my hair. Like I wish that my hair was accepted. Do you know what I mean? When I started my new job in DC, I had braids, and I said, nope, I don't want to have braids, because, and this is like now, a year or so ago, I'm like, I don't know how they'll perceive me, and I don't want to be perceived in a way that obviously is not true, but you don't know these days, you know? So I wish in that way that I could show up as myself and authentically me, you know, and I know long acrylic nails, like things like that. I wish that, because when they're on black people, it's perceived as differently than when it's on white people, if that makes sense. And so I wish that wasn't a thing. I wish my hair was more socially acceptable in its natural state, and the things that I've had to like kind of unlearn and unteach myself, I wish that I never had to learn them. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Quinlan?
Yeah, I just feel like code switching gets to a point where it feels tiring almost, that it's like you don't mind doing it like every once in a while if you're talking to like maybe a teacher or something like that, or professor. But it's like if you have to like go out like through your whole day talking in a way that doesn't feel natural to you, then it starts to like actually put like a like mental strain on you almost.
And Dr. Raleigh P talked about that anxiety and that mental strain. Do you feel like schools or colleges need to be doing more to create more inclusive environments? Or what are some things that you've seen them do that really help to kind of bridge the gap in differences, or making people, making safe spaces for Black teens and young adults specifically? Do your schools have Black student unions, or yours when you were younger, Jordan? Did they have affinity groups for Black people to gather and to be able to express their cultures? What did that look like?
I have something at my school called BSAP, which is it's for everyone, but it's mostly for Black students. And it's like a club where like everyone can come together and experience their cultures. Everyone can learn different things from one another and stuff like that. So I feel like my school doing that is good for like the environment and the students to really know how everyone's backgrounds. So
anyone else have something?
Yeah, so my school has a BAC, which is our Black Awareness Club. It isn't restricted to only Black students. Like there are a couple of white students in there who are just interested in learning about Black culture, but um that's also like provides a safe space. But in terms of something that I feel like schools could do, I feel is hiring more diverse staffs to really cover the diversity of the school. So to as I said before, how the Black teachers, it was kind of more comfortable like learning from them, and I learned better from those Black teachers. I really feel that if schools had more of those, like to sort of accommodate some of those students, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely. Jordan?
I think, you know, now that I'm out of education and I work in education, I think now I look back at my experience and I see the way that I was treated in lower school by teachers. And I think that honestly in schools, what shape you are those first 6 years. Those first 6 years. And if you see a teacher treating a kid differently, and then you're going to also learn to treat them differently. And so I think that really it's that implicit bias training. And I think that it's teaching our teachers to be cognizant and be mindful that everything is not the Black kid's fault. You know what I mean? And that it's okay for the Black kid to express themselves and to wear certain things and to eat certain foods. Because if the teacher thinks it's normal, then and the teacher acts like it's normal and the teacher doesn't blame this child, then everybody in the class will most likely follow suit. Because although kids, rebel in class and whatever, teacher sets the tone. And so if from a young age we are taught that no matter how someone acts or whatever, in whatever culture that person brings, that they deserve to be treated normally, then we don't have to worry about when we get to 11th, 12th grade, college, middle school, kids treating each other not fairly, unfairly. So I really, really think it starts in those formative years, having teachers unlearn those bad habits.
I love that. So we are just at our time to conclude. First of all, I want to thank all of you for your sacrifice of being on tonight. You all are so wonderful and I think so strong and powerful to be navigating the same things that grown-up people are navigating and having to do that while taking on all of the challenges of just being a regular old teen or a young adult. But I want to let you all close, each of you, with some advice or thoughts that you might give to another teen who is experiencing racism, another teen who is navigating code switching or navigating spaces that aren't necessarily built for them. Just a word of advice from your own experience for another teen who might be listening or young adult who might be listening today. And then we'll close with that. Who wants to start?
I just want to say, just be yourself, no matter if you are code switching or with your different groups or whatever. Just focus on the one main thing, being yourself, and never actually changing your looks, physical looks on for anyone. And yeah, just try just being yourself with everything.
Thank you for that. Quinlan?
Yeah, if I really had to give advice, I'd say I kind of agree. Just make sure that you're not changing up who you are to really accommodate somebody else.
Okay. And Jordan?
I think, yeah, same thing they say. I think just be 100% yourself and realize that it's okay to be multifaceted and that you don't have to be a product of only one of your environment when you show up. You can be a product of who you are in multiple different spaces everywhere that you show up, if that makes sense.
That's amazing. And all three of you are amazing. And I am so proud of you and so proud of the leaders that you will be and that the next generation is positioned to just hopefully continue to make progress for the Black community and for the world at large. So thank you for your sacrifice of time this evening. And thank all of you who joined us, either watching live tonight or watching the playback. Associated Black Charities would also like to issue a special thank you to the CollegeBound Foundation, who partnered with us to present this webinar. And for Associated Black Charities, I am Chrissy Thornton. Good night.